She is already standing at the center of the room when we meet her. Not at the edge. Not tucked into a corner with her papers and her patience, waiting to be noticed. She is at the center of Ravencrest's Grand Council chamber, surrounded by senior alphas and pack delegates from 5 different territories, and every eye in the room is on her, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. There is a trade dispute that has been bleeding 2 allied packs dry for 4 months. Senior warriors, experienced delegates, men who have spent their whole lives negotiating territory. They came here today prepared to argue for hours, prepared to leave without a resolution. Elira Ashenvale speaks for less than 3 minutes. Her voice is calm. Her reasoning is clean. She draws on a precedent she drafted herself 2 full seasons ago, before anyone in this room even understood the shape of the problem. And when she finishes, the argument is simply over. The men who have been circling this conflict look quietly embarrassed. Not because she embarrassed them, because the answer was always this simple, and she was the only one who could see it. The room goes still for a beat. At the head of the table, Alpha Zerion Ravencrest sits with his arms folded and his expression unreadable to almost everyone in the room. Almost. Because those who know him well enough to read the set of his jaw and the quality of his stillness, they understand that he is not simply listening. He is confirming something he already suspected. Something he has suspected for a long time. He does not look away from her for the rest of the meeting. That is Elira. That has always been Elira. And before this story goes any further, you need to know something important. This is not a story about a woman who fell apart. This is not a story about waiting beside a closed door, hoping someone will open it and say they are sorry. This is not even a story about revenge, though what happens to those who hurt her is something worth watching. This is the story of what happens when a woman who was already extraordinary stops pouring that gift into hands that were never worthy of it. It is the story of what she builds in the wide, clean space that opens up once she stops holding herself small for someone else's comfort. We are going to walk backward from this room. Back through the pain, through the betrayal, or through the night she stood at the most sacred ceremony of her pack's year and took a silver cuff off her wrist without a sound and set it down on stone and walked away. We are going to see all of it. But hold on to this image. Elira, at the center of the room, calm and precise, and completely at home in her own power. Because this is not who she became after surviving her story. This is who she always was. The story is simply about how she finally ended up somewhere that deserved her. Stay with me. Hey, quick question. How are you feeling right now? Because I need to check on you before we go any further. Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to me. It is essential that we get your support through subscriptions, likes, comments, and shares. So if this story is already pulling at your heart, which I know it is, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. It helps more than you know. Thank you. Now let us get back to the story. The sky over Blood Moon Royal Pack at dawn is the color of cold iron. It is barely light when Elira Ashenvale sits down at her desk, already working. She has been awake since before the first patrol guard changed shifts. The candles are already half burned. Her documents are spread across the entire surface, patrol schedules on the left, a supply ledger open to a page she has already memorized, and at the center, a 30-page trade resolution she spent the last 3 days refining. This document, this careful, thorough piece of work, will be presented at this morning's council meeting. or it will change the direction of Blood Moon's eastern trade relationships for the next decade, if implemented correctly, and it will be presented under someone else's name. Elira closes the ledger. She opens it again. She has stopped being bothered by things like that. Or she has learned to look like she has. She moves through Blood Moon's inner courtyard an hour later, with the quiet confidence of someone who has never needed to announce herself. Warriors call her name as she passes. A mother with a fussy infant waves from across the frost-covered grass, and Elira lifts 2 fingers in acknowledgement and keeps walking, because she knows the baby's name and the mother's worry and the remedy already, and she will send both over before noon without being asked. Near the training corridor, a young woman falls into step beside her. Her name is Zanira Wolfheart, and she is barely 20, sharp-eyed and a little breathless, holding a patrol roster with an error that has been making the rotation lopsided for 2 weeks. "I cannot figure out where the gap is," Zanira says, thrusting the paper toward her. "I have redone it 4 times. Elira takes the paper without slowing her stride. She reads for exactly 11 seconds. Then she marks 2 lines with the tip of her finger and hands it back. The gap is between the 2nd and 3rd rotation. Move the evening shift 1 hour forward. It closes itself. Zanira stares at the page. "How do you always—" But Elira is already walking. She has 17 other things to get to before the council bell rings. She passes Valor Grimwood, near the records hall. A palace scribe, young and nervous, perpetually carrying something heavy in his face that has nothing to do with the weight of the documents in his arms. He hands her a misfiled report with his eyes averted, apologetic in a way that goes just a little past the ordinary awkwardness of a clerical error. She notices it. She does not yet know what to do with it. She corrects the report, returns it without comment, and moves on. At the window that overlooks Draven's tower, she slows without meaning to. The curtains are drawn. They have been drawn for most mornings now, for more months than she has been willing to count. The morning strategy review, the first working hour of Blood Moon's leadership day, when patrol reports are received and acted on, has quietly become her responsibility. There was no conversation where this was decided, no formal announcement. Or Draven simply stopped appearing, and the reports kept arriving, and Elira started opening them. The pack adjusted. Nothing broke. She made sure of it. She stands at the window a beat longer than she needs to. Something moves at the back of her chest. A familiar ache, the kind she has long since stopped naming. Then she turns and walks to the council chamber. The meeting opens with the supply dispute she already solved in her head before breakfast. 2 senior warriors have been circling the same dead-end disagreement about grain allocation for a week. Elira listens through half a minute of it, then speaks 2 sentences that redirect the entire problem to its actual source, a misfiled distribution record from last quarter, and the argument collapses on itself. Elder Kyrox, seated at the far end of the council table, catches her eye from across the room. He is old enough to have silver in his hair down to his shoulders, and the expression on his face is the expression of a man who has been watching something happen for a long time and has never stopped being bothered by it. He gives her a small, sincere nod that says, "I see it. I always see it." She gives him a small one back. Then she returns to her documents. Alpha King, Draven Nightfang, sits at the head of the table. He is striking in the specific way that powerful men who know their own power are striking. Composed, filling the room without effort, the kind of presence that packs were built to follow. He takes the resolution Elira drafted. He presents the framework she built in 3 calm sentences, as if the idea arrived from somewhere in the air above his head, and the council nods and agrees, and the meeting moves forward. Elira watches her work presented to the room from 30 feet away and feels something she has become very skilled at not feeling. After the meeting, she moves through the corridor toward her office. She hears Sorene Crowhaven before she sees her. Not the voice exactly, more the quality of the space around it, the way a room adjusts when Sorene is in it. She is already positioned near Draven's shoulder in the corridor outside the chamber, close enough to be deliberate, far enough to pass as coincidence. She is beautiful in a way that is easy to trust, all warmth and gentle attention, the specific kind of warmth that makes powerful people feel chosen. Draven is smiling at something she said. He has not moved away from her. He has not been moving away for a while now. Serene's eyes find Elira over Draven's shoulder. Her smile widens immediately, bright and generous and perfectly timed. Elira, you work so hard. I honestly do not know how you manage everything. Her voice is full of admiration. Her eyes at their center are perfectly still. Practice, Elira says, pleasantly. She walks to her office. She sits at her desk in the quiet that follows and thinks about the corridor. She thinks about where Serena was standing. Not arriving. Standing already there. Already positioned. The meeting had only just ended. She had been there the whole time. Elira opens her documents. She keeps working. The thought sits in the room with her like a small, cold thing and refuses to leave. There is a stone basin in Blood Moon's inner courtyard, ringed with moonflowers that bloom silver-white in summer and stay dark through winter. Elira has passed it every single morning for 5 years. She was 19 the first time she stood beside it. It was the night after the Blood Moon ceremony. Blood Moon's most sacred annual gathering, the night the whole pack lights fires and gives thanks for the bonds that hold them together. She had been standing near the back of the great hall, doing what she always did at celebrations, which was quietly making sure everything was working so that everyone else could simply enjoy it. She was checking that the elder seats were properly arranged when she happened to look up. Draven Nightfang looked at her from across the firelit hall, and the world stopped making its usual noise. But the mate pull is not something that can be fully explained to someone who has never felt it. It is not attraction, though that is in there too. It is something older and deeper, the specific recognition of a soul that has been known before, in some form, in some life. It arrives not as want, but as arrival. As finally. It hit them both at the same moment. She saw it on his face before she could feel her own reaction. A pure, unguarded shock. An opening. The most honest thing she had ever seen from him. He did not expect it either, she remembers thinking. That means it is real. She had not been wrong about that. Not about what the bond was at the start. The early days were luminous in the way that only a few seasons in a whole life get to be. Draven would seek her counsel before morning meetings, not because she was useful, or which she always was, but because he wanted to know what she thought. There were evenings where he would find her in the library and simply sit across from her while she worked, neither of them speaking, both of them entirely comfortable in the quiet. Evenings where the silence between them felt like its own conversation. He used to ask her every morning before the day began, "What does the day need?" That question. She still carries the memory of it in a place she has not yet figured out how to reach. The turning came the way these things always come. Not in a single moment, but in 100 small ones. Like water moving through stone, so slowly you do not see the erosion until the shape has already changed. A council dinner he had to cancel, no explanation given, and when she asked, a distracted wave of his hand that said the question itself was inconvenient. an opinion she offered in a morning meeting that he interrupted and then never returned to. The library evenings that became less frequent, and then infrequent, and then simply stopped, without announcement, without explanation. She had noticed when they stopped. She had not let herself name what that meant. And somewhere around the 8th month, she cannot pinpoint the exact week, only that it was deep in winter, she realized she had not been asked, "What does the day need?" In a very long time. Sorine Crowhaven arrived 9 months ago as part of a visiting Shadow Fang delegation. She had reasons to extend her stay, and then more reasons, and then somehow she was simply no longer leaving. She had a gift, a particular, and a practiced warmth that made powerful men feel like the most interesting person in the room. The kind of warmth that feels like being understood without having to explain yourself. Draven responded the way men respond when they have, quietly, over a long stretch of time, convinced themselves that their mate's steadiness is duty rather than devotion. When they have confused someone's capacity to bear difficulty with evidence that the difficulty is not affecting them. He was not cruel. That would have been easier. He was simply elsewhere, already looking at something else that felt warmer and closer and easier to be around. There was a gathering, a mid-year interpack celebration, visiting allies from 3 different territories. Draven stood in the receiving line and introduced his court, the warrior captains, the senior elders. "Oh, Sereni, a wonderful addition to our court. I honestly do not know how we managed before her." And then he walked past Elira without pausing. Not with hostility, not even with intention. Simply without pausing, the way you do not pause beside a window when you are looking at what is on the other side of it. A visiting alpha from Ironclaw Pack stopped. He stepped forward and extended his hand to Elira himself. "I have been following your Moonridge proposal with great interest," he said. "Exceptional thinking. The claw's structure alone is unlike anything I have seen from any pack delegation in years." "Thank you," she said. She smiled. She was very good at smiling. Inside, something that had been patient for a very long time was arriving at the end of its patience. That night, alone in her quarters, now she sat at her desk and opened the small drawer she almost never opens. Inside it, pressed flat between 2 pieces of parchment, is a moonflower from the night of the bonding ceremony. 5 years old now, dried to paper-thin translucency, but still holding its shape. Still silver-white at the edges. She held it up to the candle and looked at it for a long time. She was thinking about the version of Draven who stood at the stone basin at 19 and looked at her with his whole honest face and had not known what to do with what he was feeling. The one who asked, "What does the day need?" and actually listened to the answer. She has been searching for him in the man he became. She has been looking for him in every almost moment, every returned counsel nod, every shared silence that felt, just barely, like it used to. She closed the drawer. She blew out the candle. In the dark, for the first time in a long time, she let herself ask the question she had been refusing. What if I have not been looking in the wrong man? What if I have been looking in the right direction, and the person I was looking for is simply not there anymore? The room offered no answer. She sat with the question until the fire burned low. Then she went to sleep. She had 17 things to do in the morning. She always had 17 things to do in the morning. The trade resolution she built over 4 days was 30 pages long, 4 full versions, each one better than the last, every clause written with the specific care of someone who understands that the words you choose in a treaty determine not just what you agree to today, but what you are arguing about in 10 years. She had placed it on the council table the evening before the morning meeting, anchored it with a stone weight, gone home to rest. She came back the next morning to add one notation she had thought of on her walk home. The document was gone. The meeting proceeded anyway. Draven presented a verbal outline at the council table, 3 broad sentences in place of 30 pages of careful architecture. The council nodded. They moved forward. No one asked about the written framework. No one mentioned that something was missing. Elira said nothing during the meeting. She asked a clarifying question about implementation timelines. She took notes. She kept her face arranged in its usual composed expression. And after the meeting, she went looking. She found what was left of it in the fireplace grate of the council antechamber. Not fully burned. Was enough of her own handwriting legible, her careful notation marks, the clause numbering system she developed herself, to leave no possible question about what it had been. Sorina Crowhaven was already in the antechamber, standing near the bookshelves, very naturally, the way a person stands somewhere when they have prepared a reason to be there. The warmth arrived the moment she saw Elira, that familiar, generous brightness, the apologetic tilt of her head, the softness in her voice. "Oh, Elira, those were yours? I am so sorry. I was clearing a stack of old documents, and I must have gathered them by mistake. I am still learning the administrative flow here." Her voice was perfect, every word measured for warmth. Her eyes, behind the warmth, were still. Not guilty, not afraid. Entirely, calmly still. That Elira looked at her for a full moment, long enough to see the warmth and the stillness together and understand that they were not contradictions, that they had always been there at the same time, and she had been choosing to read only one of them. "Of course," she said. "These things happen." She returned to her office. She sat down. She rewrote the 30-page document from memory in 4 hours. She filed it through the standard route. She told herself it was a careless mistake. She almost made herself believe it. 3 days later, she heard Sorine in a back corridor. It was not the voice she heard in the great hall or the council antechamber. This voice was low and precise, and entirely without the public warmth. The register of someone doing work, not performing ease. Sorine was speaking to Vialor, the palace scribe, and the instructions she was giving him were specific and careful, and dressed in administrative language that sounded routine until you understood what it was actually doing. Route the filed reports through the extended review process. Use the administrative backlog as justification. Keep the language procedural. No one will question procedural language. Elira stood at the curve of the corridor for 3 full seconds. Long enough to hear the shape of it. Long enough to understand that what she was listening to was not improvisation. This had been built deliberately over time with the specific patience of someone who understood how administrative systems could be used to disappear someone without leaving obvious fingerprints. She stood there for 3 seconds. Then Sorine turned and saw her. The warmth returned like a curtain dropping into place. "Elira, you startled me, just sorting through a filing confusion with Valor." Valor's posture was small. He did not look up. "Of course," Elira said. "Good evening, Sorine." She walked to her office. She closed the door. She sat in the dark. "I see it now," she thought. "Very clearly. All of it. I see the shape of it." And then the harder thought, the one that followed the first one like a shadow. "I have seen pieces of it for months. I chose to read them as accidents. I chose the less painful version of what I was looking at." She sat with that for a long time. The dark was quiet. The candle burned down. The Interpack Summit was held on neutral ground, a council hall in the open territory between 3 pack borders, chosen specifically because no one had dominance there. My Elira had prepared Blood Moon's position on a border realignment for 2 weeks. She had been thorough, as she always was. She had anticipated every counter-argument, as she always did. She stood at the presentation table with her documents and began to speak. She had been speaking for approximately 4 minutes, building carefully toward a resolution framework that would satisfy all 3 packs, when Draven's hand came up. Elira tends to complicate straightforward matters. He said it lightly, the tone of someone making a small joke about someone they know well. He smiled at the visiting delegates. Let me summarize. 5 delegations were in the room, representatives from packs that had respected Blood Moon's diplomatic position for years, a position Elira had built, maintained, and protected through some of the most complicated interpack negotiations in the region's recent history. Several of them looked at the table. One of them straightened slightly, the way people straighten when they have witnessed something they were not meant to witness. Across the room, Alpha Zerion Ravencrest did not look at the table. He looked at Draven for exactly 1 measured second. Then he turned and looked at Elira, direct, unhurried, the kind of look that does not flinch or perform, and said, in a voice that did not need to rise to carry the room, "I would like to hear the rest." She was building toward something sound. That was all. No drama, no confrontation. Simply a statement about what was happening in the room, delivered by someone who had no interest in pretending it wasn't. The room recalibrated, or the delegates settled. Elira finished her presentation. Her resolution was formally accepted before the session closed. After the hall emptied, Zerion approached her table while she organized her papers. He moved like someone who does not require space to be cleared for him. He stopped a comfortable distance away and waited until she looked up. "You should not be used to what just happened," he said. There was no warmth being performed, no softness meant to manage her feelings. Just a direct observation, delivered straight. "I am," she said. Because she was. Because she had been, for longer than she had wanted to know. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You should not be." 4 words, simple, level, and more weighted than anything that had been said to her in months. He told her there was an open position at Ravencrest, advisory and strategic, exactly the kind of work she was built for, credited to the person who actually did it. No conditions, no timeline. She could come when she was ready, if she was ever ready, and if she never was, the conversation could still simply be what it was, an honest thing said to someone who deserved to hear it. She did not say yes. She gathered her papers and said good night, and walked out of the hall into the cold. But she did not forget it. She could not have forgotten it if she had tried. Not the offer, specifically. The 4 words before it. "You should not be." She turned them over on the long walk home, in the cold, in the dark. By the time she reached Blood Moon's gate, she had made no decisions. But something had shifted in a place deep enough that she couldn't see it yet. It had simply shifted. Quietly. Or the way things shift before they change. The Blood Moon ceremony is the most sacred night in Blood Moon Pack's calendar. Every family attends. Warriors fill the upper rows of the great hall. The children sit with the elders, the littlest ones falling asleep in laps before the 2nd hour. The great hall is lit by iron torches and smells of pine resin and cedar and pressed moonflowers, silver-white moonflowers, arranged in long ceremonial rows along the stone walls and the center table. Elira arranged them herself 3 days ago. She does it every year. She takes her seat at the long ceremonial table. She brought a few things with her out of habit, a trade ledger she planned to pass to Elder Kyrox after the gathering, a patrol note, ordinary small business, the kind of work she carries the way other people carry a comfort object. She is not performing busyness. She simply never stops being useful, not even in a room meant for celebration. She does not know, sitting down, that tonight is different. The ceremony begins. The elders speak. The warrior captains make the traditional sworn declarations. Pack members exchange the ceremonial thread ties that symbolize the bonds between families. It is warm and full, and exactly the way it has always been. Exactly the way she has helped it to be, for 5 consecutive years, through quiet planning and early mornings, and the kind of care that never gets credited, because it is designed to be invisible. Then Draven Nightfang stands. He is composed and steady and certain. Exactly the Alpha King he was built to be in rooms like this. His voice fills the hall the way it always fills every room it enters. He talks about the strength of the pack, about leadership, about the sacred weight of chosen bonds, about the responsibility of an Alpha King to choose with clarity and purpose. Elira watches him with the same quiet attention she has always given him. Even now. She watches his hands, the set of his jaw, the measured pause he takes before important words. She has memorized this man without meaning to. 5 years of learning him. The way you learn the geography of a place you have lived in long enough to navigate in the dark. She is watching him when he says her name, and then the sentence that follows it. He is, after long and careful consideration, formally severing the fated mate bond. His future, his chosen path, his Luna, is Sorine Crowhaven. The words land in her chest one at a time, slow and heavy, like stones dropped into still water. She processes them once, the meaning does not shift. She processes them again. The meaning does not change. She does not make a sound. She does not move. She watches Sorine step forward from the side of the hall, gracious, beautifully surprised in the specific way of a person performing surprise about something they planned. And she watches the warriors strike the ceremonial tables in approval. She watches the elders nod. She watches 300 wolves who have brought their problems to her at dawn, who have trusted her remedies and relied on her frameworks and eaten at tables she organized. She watches them celebrate. She looks down at the surface of the table in front of her. She looks at the trade ledger she was going to hand to Elder Kyrox tonight. She looks at the patrol note. They small ordinary things. The work she brought because she is always working, because there is always something that needs her attention, because that is the shape her love has taken for 5 years. And no one has ever asked her to name it as love. Then she looks at her left wrist. The silver mate thread cuff has been there for 3 years, since the night of the bonding. She has never taken it off. She has reached for it in hard moments, pressed 2 fingers against the metal as if it were an anchor. She reaches for it now, without deciding to, and her fingers find the clasp. She removes it, quietly, with no announcement, no ceremony of her own, no drama. She sets it on the stone surface beside her. What the sound it makes is so small, a faint, clean click against the ceremonial stone, that it should be swallowed entirely by the noise of 300 celebrating wolves. It is not quite, because Elder Kyrox is watching her from across the room. His face, when she meets his eyes, holds something she has only ever seen once before, the specific, unguarded grief of a man watching something he tried to prevent and could not stop. She holds his gaze for one moment, just one. Then she straightens her papers. She stands. She gathers everything she brought. The ledger, the patrol note, all of it, and straightens the stack the way she always straightens things when she leaves a room, because order is its own kind of dignity, and she has not stopped being herself. She squares her shoulders. She walks to the great ceremonial doors and pushes them open. 300 heads turn. She does not look back at any of them. The doors close behind her. The corridor outside is cold and completely silent. She walks 3 steps. She stops. She presses one hand, open and flat, against the cold stone wall. She closes her eyes. She breathes. 1 breath, 2, 3. The slow and deliberate kind, the kind she has taught dozens of pack members to use in their worst moments. She has a very bad few seconds. She does not let them become a minute. Then she opens her eyes. She lifts her hand from the wall. She keeps walking. She does not run. She has never run. She crosses Blood Moon's inner boundary near the eastern tree line before midnight. She crosses the outer boundary an hour after that. In the deep cover of the old-growth pines, and far enough from the pack that the sound and scent of the ceremony has thinned to almost nothing, she shifts. A pale gold wolf lands silently on the forest floor. She runs. Not from grief, though the grief is enormous. Not from rage, though there is rage too, deep and complicated. She runs because she has been holding still for 5 years, because her body has been carrying everything she was not allowed to set down, and now there is nowhere left to put it, and running is the only way the enormous pressure of it has anywhere to go. She runs until the smell of pine resin and moonflowers is gone from her coat entirely. She runs until the torchlight of the ceremony hall is swallowed by dark trees, as she runs until there is nothing in any direction, except the forest and the cold ground and the clean, indifferent silence of a night that doesn't know her name. She runs until she stops. And she doesn't stop at Blood Moon. She walks through Ravencrest's outer gate at first light, still carrying her documents. Of course she is. She has nowhere to put them. She is carrying everything she owns that matters. 3 years of treaty drafts, her personal healer's reference, 2 changes of clothes, and the pale gold wolf's dignity that does not know how to be set aside even in the hours after everything falls apart. Varric Stormclaw, Zerion's beta, is already at the gate. He is a tall man with a precise bearing and the particular economy of movement that belongs to people who have learned not to waste anything. For he takes one look at her, what she is carrying, what she is wearing, the specific composure of a person who has had a catastrophic night and refused to collapse, and asks no questions at all. He leads her to a room in the Eastern Lodge, clean, simple, cedar-beamed, smelling of wood smoke and cold water. He leaves food on a tray outside the door without knocking, and before he goes, he says 3 things, quietly and with no performance. The room is hers for as long as she needs it. The Alpha will speak with her when she is ready, and not before. If she needs anything in the night, his quarters are at the end of the same corridor. Then he leaves. She listens to his footsteps until they disappear. She sits on the edge of the clean bed in the cedar-smelling room and allows herself 5 minutes of complete stillness. Or she does not fill the 5 minutes with thinking. She is done thinking for tonight. She sleeps for 11 hours. When she wakes, the light through the window is midday gold. She lies still for a moment, oriented only by the smell of the room, cedar, cold water, wood smoke, and the silence, which is the silence of a place that has not needed anything from her overnight. Nobody called her name. Nothing required her attention. The night passed without her managing it. She had forgotten what that felt like. Zerion is brief and direct when they meet, He does not perform sympathy. He does not make her discuss what happened, or ask her how she is holding up, or offer her the kind of careful concern that requires her to reassure the person offering it. He simply places a folder of current operational challenges on the table between them and says, "Tell me what you see." She picks it up. She reads for 4 minutes. Then she tells him, 3 structural inefficiencies in the Eastern Patrol System. 1 treaty clause in their standing Moon Ridge Agreement that creates a liability they have not yet been asked to honor but will be, and a supply chain gap in the northern medicinal stores that she could resolve with a redirect they are probably not currently aware is possible. He listens. He nods once. "Start Monday," he says. She almost smiles. "Today is Monday. Then start now." She does. The rebuilding of Elira Ashenvale does not happen in a single moment. It happens the way real things happen, in accumulation, in the gradual arrival of a new normal, in the slow expansion of a life that has finally been given room to breathe. Veyric is exacting and demanding, and respects her immediately, which is its own kind of warmth from a man who does not distribute his respect casually. When she reorganizes a patrol inefficiency in 20 minutes that his own team spent a week circling, he looks at the revised schedule for a long moment, and then says, quietly and without elaboration, that he is glad she is here. Pack members learn her name by the 3rd day. By the end of the first week, they have stopped treating her like a guest. She is greeted in corridors, consulted on small things, invited to sit at tables that do not have a designated edge set aside for her. She sits at the center because there is space at the center. And it turns out she does not have to earn it. She was simply offered it, not the way you are offered a seat in a room that has always had room for you. Zanira Wolfheart shows up at Ravencrest's gate on the 4th morning. She is carrying everything she owns in one pack and wearing the expression of someone who made a decision quickly and has had enough time since making it to be completely certain about it. When Elira finds her at the gate, Zanira simply shrugs and says she could not imagine staying in a place that looked at what Blood Moon had done, and accepted it. Elira stands very still for a moment. Then she hugs her. Zanira becomes her shadow, then her student, then something that sits comfortably between a younger sister and a reminder of who Elira used to be before she learned to make herself small, before she learned that being steady was safer than being visible, that being useful was easier than being known. Watching Zanira move through Ravencrest is like watching someone hold a mirror to her younger self. The brightness in her, the hunger to learn, the way she takes in information and runs with it and comes back for more. Elira feeds it with everything she has, freely, without withholding, because she is no longer in a place where giving herself means losing herself. 3 weeks in, Veyric walks into the healer's lodge at the wrong moment. The pack healer, a formidable woman named Orlyra Frostfang, with iron-grey hair and a voice like a verdict, has been pursuing Veyric's shoulder injury with the patience and determination of someone who considers untreated injuries a personal affront. He had been ignoring a rotator strain for 6 weeks with the specific stubbornness of men who believe their bodies are exempt from ordinary consequences. Elira is there to pick up a medicinal supply order when Orlyra corners Veyric in the doorway, and the entire exchange that follows, Veyric at his most formally stoic, Orlyra at her most relentlessly direct, the shoulder in question beginning to lose the argument by degrees, is so precisely, absurdly wonderful that Elira laughs. Not the polite laugh she has been distributing in public for years. The real one. The kind that comes up from somewhere deep, that takes over without asking permission, that moves through her whole face and cannot be managed or moderated or directed anywhere else. She laughs until she has to brace against the doorframe. Norlira watches her with immense satisfaction. Varric suffers through it with the dignity of a man accepting consequences. From the corner of the room, where he had been present for an unrelated reason and had simply not left yet, Zerion watches her laugh. He does not say anything. He does not draw attention to the moment. He simply watches, and he files something away in a quiet, internal place, and later he will think about it. The way she looked, laughing like that, completely unguarded, completely herself. And it will matter to him more than he is ready to name. The first evening she sits at the center of the long table at dinner. She contributes to a conversation for 10 uninterrupted minutes, and no one looks at their documents. No one subtly redirects the discussion. No one credits her contribution to someone else. Or someone builds on what she said. Someone else asks her a follow-up question. A third person laughs at something she adds to the end of a long story about a border incident, and the laughter moves around the table easily, warmly, the way laughter moves in a room where everyone is actually present. She looks down at her plate at one point and realizes she has been talking, simply, openly talking, for longer than she has in recent memory. Not reporting, not presenting, not being useful, talking. She does not know exactly what is shifting in her. She only knows that something is. On her 4th evening at Ravencrest, she finds a rocky overlook above the Pack settlement, a flat stone shelf at the crest of a ridge, with a long, clear view down to the lodges and the firelit windows and the warm lights coming on one by one as the night thickens. She stands there in the cold after dark and breathes, footsteps behind her, even, unhurried, entirely unconcerned with announcing themselves as anything other than what they are. Zerion stops beside her at a comfortable distance, close enough that she can feel the warmth of him in the cold air, far enough that nothing is demanded or implied. He does not explain why he is there. He does not ask if she wants company. He simply stands beside her, looking at the same view, and after a while he asks, "How does it feel?" She is quiet for a long moment. "Like I can breathe," she says. I had forgotten what that felt like. He says nothing for a while. Then, "Good." Just that. Steady and simple, and asking nothing from her in return. They watch the Pack lights together until the last warmth drains out of the evening sky. She does not know yet that this ridge will become their ridge, that this will be the place where the most important conversations of the next months will happen, one by one, each one a little more honest than the last. She does not know that yet. She only knows that she does not want to leave. She stays until the cold makes it impossible. And that, in itself, is something entirely new. The reports begin arriving through Interpack channels about 3 weeks after her departure. Varric delivers them to her without commentary, because he is the kind of person who understands that commentary is not always what is needed. He sets the folder on her desk and leaves, or then she opens it in the quiet of her office and reads with the careful, separated attention of someone assessing damage to a structure they no longer occupy. The Moonridge trade framework has collapsed. The resolution she built over 4 days, the 30-page document that ended up partially burned in a council antechamber fireplace, had never been formally replaced. After the ceremony, with Sorinai in the Luna's role and the administrative transfer in progress, Blood Moon had entered their second negotiation session, with Moonridge using Draven's 3-sentence verbal outline. The session fell apart in its opening hour. By the second meeting, Moonridge had withdrawn from the framework entirely, and was now negotiating directly with Ironclaw instead, cutting Blood Moon out of a trade relationship they had held for 9 years. A patrol conflict in the Eastern Corridor has escalated to a formal territorial dispute with a neighboring pack. The resolution Elira had drafted for exactly this contingency, already completed, already filed, had never made it to the council table. It sat in the administrative backlog, routed there by procedural instruction, and no one had thought to look for it, because no one except Elira had known it existed. 3 long-standing allied packs have quietly withdrawn from joint operations. Not loudly, not with formal letters of complaint. Quietly, the way allies withdraw when they no longer trust the competence of the partner they are working with. The administrative failures had been small individually: wrong dates, delayed confirmations, misfiled agreements, and devastating in accumulation. She sets the folder down carefully. Aunt Elder Kyrox warned me, she thinks. Not with bitterness, with the clear, almost peaceful recognition of something she already knew. He had told her, months ago, in one of his small, precise ways, that what she was sustaining was not a partnership, that what she was doing for Blood Moon was so thorough, so complete, that the pack had stopped being able to see where her contribution ended and the structure itself began. That when that kind of contribution is removed, the result is not an absence, it is a collapse. She had heard him. She had not let herself act on what she heard, because acting on it would have required her to choose herself, and she had not yet understood that choosing herself was not betrayal. It was simply the truth of what she was worth. She understands it now. Valar Grimwood came forward on his own, but no one went looking for him. No investigation summoned his confession. He arrived at Blood Moon's formal council chambers 3 weeks after the ceremony with a written account, pages of it, in handwriting that was shakier than usual, and yet completely, carefully legible. The account of a young man who had carried something too heavy for too long, and had finally understood that carrying it was doing more damage than setting it down. He described every instruction he received from Sorene Crowhaven over 8 months of careful, sustained administrative sabotage. The reports routed through extended review processes using procedural language as cover. The correspondence between Elira and allied pack leaders selectively delayed and softened, timed to arrive at the moments when the meeting that would have mattered had already concluded, or the specific systematic campaign to make Elira appear absent at the precise moments when her presence would have changed outcomes, visible enough to be present but consistently, surgically excluded from the moments that counted. Sorene had understood how administrative systems worked at a level that most people never think about. She had understood that power does not always announce itself loudly, that the quietest kind of removal, the kind that uses paperwork and process and perfectly positioned accidents, leaves no fingerprints because it looks exactly like the normal inefficiency of a large organization. Draven opened a formal investigation the morning after Valor's testimony arrived. He sits alone in his council chamber, late at night, with old correspondence spread around him. The fire has burned down to embers. He does not rebuild it. He goes through document after document with the focused, grim attention of a man who has finally stopped choosing which version of what he is looking at is most comfortable. He finds the timing patterns. He does not find proof of each individual act. Sorene was too careful for that. What he finds is pattern. The gaps where Elira's influence should have been felt and wasn't, mapped against the moments where decisions were made without her voice. The correspondence delays, visible now in hindsight as a rhythm. The administrative holds, logged in processing records that nobody thought to look at because they looked exactly like ordinary backlog. He finds the ash in the council antechamber fireplace grate. He had noticed the warmth of it weeks ago, working late one evening. had noticed pages of careful handwriting, still legible at the edges where the fire had not fully reached, and thought, what? That someone had been burning old drafts? He had not looked closely. He had not asked. He had been very skilled throughout this whole period at not asking questions whose answers would have required something difficult from him. He picks up the silver mate thread cuff from his desk. He has kept it in his desk drawer since the morning after the ceremony, wrapped in a piece of cloth without examining exactly why. He knows why now. He turns it over in both hands. He remembers the gathering where he introduced Sorine to visiting allies and walked past Elira without pausing. He remembers the treaty she drafted being presented in his voice. He remembers the mornings she was already at her desk when he was still in his tower with the curtains drawn. He remembers asking, "What does the day need?" And he remembers when he stopped asking, not because the answer stopped mattering, but because he had started getting his sense of being valued from somewhere that required less of him. He did not lose her to circumstance. He did not lose her to Sorine's campaign, though the campaign was real and it worked. He lost her the way you lose a light, not when it goes out, but in all the long months you spent choosing not to look at it. What did I do? The question arrives in the silence without drama. The room holds it and offers nothing back. He has not earned an answer. He was capable of seeing her. He had the information. He had the bond. He simply kept looking slightly past her, or again and again, and Sorine understood that particular habit and built her entire plan on it. He sets the cuff down carefully. It is too late. He knows it the way you know a door has closed, not because you cannot see the door, but because you no longer have the key, and the person who made the key is no longer here. He was the one who handed it back. He simply does not remember the exact moment he decided to. The Interpack Summit is held in the great stone hall on neutral ground, a high-arched building between three pack territories, its windows tall enough to let in the full sky, its central table long enough to seat every delegation at once. Ravencrest arrives first. Elira takes her seat at the center of the delegation, not at the edge, not in the position she was always assigned at Blood Moon, the functional seat, but the one near the working papers, the one that said useful but not central. At the center of the table, in the chair beside Zarian, with Varric on her left and Zenora, attending her first full summit, her posture impeccably prepared, on his right. She arranges her documents. She breathes. She is calm in a way that has nothing to do with suppression and everything to do with being in the right place. Blood Moon enters 20 minutes later. Draven leads them in with his natural commanding bearing. He moves through the hall the way he always moves through halls, assuming the space will arrange itself around him, and finding, as it always has, that it does. He is halfway to his seat when his eyes cross the table and find her. He stops. One step. A barely visible interruption in his stride, barely half a second. Then he recovers and continues to his chair. His face returns to composed authority. He does not look at her again directly. Elira met his eyes for the half-second they were offered. Level. Unhurried. She held the look until his gaze moved elsewhere. Then she returned to her documents. The exchange took less than 3 seconds and said everything. Elder Kyrox enters at the end of the Blood Moon delegation, serving as a council observer in a role he requested himself after filing his formal complaint, which turned out to be, among other things, the only formal complaint of his 40-year career. He finds Elira's face across the hall and holds it for a moment. Then he smiles at her. Small, private. The smile of a person who worried about someone for a long time and has just confirmed that the worrying is no longer necessary. She smiles back. The real one. He deserves the real one. The formal session opens, and Elira leads, not because anyone told her to, not because she was assigned the position, because Zerion looks at her at the opening of the first item on the agenda and gestures towards the floor with the simple confidence of a man who has never found her expertise threatening and has always found it worth stepping aside for. She speaks with a precision that makes the room pay attention in the specific way rooms pay attention when they recognize they are listening to someone exceptional. Her arguments are clean and load-bearing. When other delegations push back, she redirects them with a patience that is not indulgence, but certainty. She knows where the argument is going before they do, and she has already been there and back. Zerion defers to her on specific treaty language with the natural ease of someone who has made peace with a fact and finds it only admirable. The room notices. It is meant to notice. Not as performance. Nothing Elira does is performance, but as the natural result of a woman finally operating in the full reach of her ability in a room that has stopped trying to contain it. At one point, a delegate from a smaller pack she has never worked with leans forward and asks her, in the midst of a complex clause discussion, who she trained under. "Myself," she says simply. He nods, with the respectful expression of someone receiving an answer that explains a great deal. The formal session closes. The hall begins to empty. Draven crosses the floor toward her before she has finished gathering her documents. She hears his footsteps. She knows them. She will probably always know them. And she turns with polite attention, the same composed face she has always been able to arrange when she needs it. He uses her name with a familiarity that no longer belongs to him. She addresses him by title. The formality lands in his expression like a small, cold weight. "You left without a proper explanation," he says. "I filed my formal resignation through the correct channels," she replies, pleasantly precise. "Your beta confirmed receipt the morning after the ceremony. You abandoned your responsibilities." She tilts her head a fraction. "My position had already been filled before I walked away from it." He changes direction, the way men do when the first approach isn't working. He speaks about the pack, about legacy, about the bonds of obligation that exist beyond personal feeling. He speaks with conviction, because he has always been most convincing when he is most wrong. Then, finally, "Come home, Elira." She is quiet for a moment, testing the word. "Home," she says. "This is my home. I live here. I built something here. I chose it." She looks at him steadily, without hostility, without heat. The specific calm of someone who has had this conversation with herself many times in the dark, and has used up all the energy she once had for having it out loud. "I hope Blood Moon finds its footing," she says. "I mean that. Genuinely." She turns back to her documents. Sorine steps forward. The composure that carried her through months of calculated work has been running at high cost for weeks. The investigation, Valor's testimony, or the collapse of the administrative systems she built her influence on. It has been exacting a toll that her performance has been working hard to conceal. The performance holds in formal settings. It is not holding right now. "You are dressing your own failure in dignity," she says. Her voice is bright with controlled anger. "You left because you could not hold what was fated to you." Elira turns. She looks at Sorine the way she looks at everything, clearly, without the comfortable version. The room has gone very still. When she speaks, her voice is even, not raised, not sharp, simply exact, the way a clean cut is exact. She names it all. The burned treaty, the date, the antechamber, the warmth and the stillness in Sorine's eyes that occupied the same face at the same time. The correspondence delays, the routes they took, The procedural language used to make them invisible, the specific meeting outcomes they were designed to affect. Vylor's instructions in the back corridor, the low, precise register, the language chosen to sound administrative, the timing that was not coincidental. Every piece of it, named calmly and in order, in front of every delegation currently watching from around the room. "I know all of it," she says, "and I want you to understand something. I am not angry about it anymore." A pause. She gives the words room. Anger requires the thing to still matter to me, and it does not. Sorina moves. Later, Elira will not be entirely sure what Sorina intended. It does not matter. Elira's hand comes up, controlled, no aggression, and she positions herself between Sorina and the forward direction of her movement. She holds her firmly for one moment, then releases and steps back without drama, with the complete authority of someone who has never needed rage to have power. Zerion steps forward. He stands beside Elira and looks at Draven across the table. He does not raise his voice. He has never needed to. "You had her," he says, "every single day. She was there, and you had her." He lets that sit for a moment. She is standing where she stands because she chose to be here. That choice is the only verdict that matters. Draven says nothing. There is nothing that would fit in the space that follows. He stands with the particular stillness of a man who has just been given, by someone who has no reason to be unkind, the clearest possible view of exactly what he chose to undo. The summit adjourns, or the firelight in Zerion's window is warm and steady when she arrives. He opens the door before she has raised her hand to knock, as if he was already nearby, already listening, already present in the way he is present when something matters. They sit by the fire in 2 chairs at a comfortable angle, and she tells him what she is thinking. Not in a report or a summary, but simply the way people talk when the day has been long and real, and the person beside them has already proven they can hold it. She tells him that the confrontation today was not her closure. She had thought, in the weeks leading up to the summit, that it might be, that facing Sorinai and Draven in that room would be the moment that completed something. But that is not what she found. She had found her closure the night she walked out of the Blood Moon ceremony, with the silver cuff on the table and her documents under her arm. She found it in the forest, in the cold, running until the weight of 5 years finally had somewhere to go. She found it on the first morning she woke up in the cedar-smelling room and heard nothing except her own breathing, and felt, with shock and then with gratitude, the enormous relief of not being needed by something that did not deserve her. What happened today was not closure. It was confirmation. Every decision she made was the right one. Zerion listens. He does not interrupt. He does not rush toward the resolution of what she is saying. He lets it arrive at its own pace, and when it does, he is still there. She is quiet for a moment after. The fire settles. The pack lights burn through the window, steady and warm in the dark. She reaches up and holds his face in both hands. She has been looking at him clearly for months now, the way she looks at everything, without the comfortable version, without softening or performing or reading into it what she needs, rather than what is there. She has been looking at him with her full attention, and she knows what she is seeing. "I love you, Zerion," said the way she says the most important things. Not as question, not as impulse, as fact, as something she has examined carefully from every angle and confirmed. Something happens in his expression, a warmth, deep and private, reaching toward something he has been refusing to let himself expect. "I have been loving you," he says quietly, "since before I had any right to." She kisses him first, are slow and deliberate, the way you do something when you have thought about it honestly and chosen it completely. When they separate, his forehead rests against hers and doesn't move. "My Luna," he says softly. She laughs, warm, private, wholly herself. "You are very certain about that." I prefer the word sure. She leans into him. Below them, the pack lights burn. The fire beside them holds steady. Outside, Ravencrest moves through its evening. Zanera probably still bent over her reports with too much enthusiasm, Varric probably still pretending he is not fond of everyone in the room, or Lyra Frostfang probably winning another argument with a stubborn patient. And all of it is warm and real and hers. The gathering hall at Ravencrest is full and golden. Long tables, candlelight, or the smell of cedar and roasted grain and something sweet that all Lyra's apprentices have been working on all afternoon. It is the mid-year pack gathering, not as sacred as the blood moon ceremony, but warmer in its own way, because it is a celebration of ordinary life, of the season that has passed, of the work that has been done together. Zanera Wolfheart stands at the front of the hall. She is presenting a quarterly patrol efficiency report to the full Elder Council. Her first independent report, the first time she has led a full formal briefing without Elira beside her. She stands at the board with her shoulders squared and her notes at her elbow and her eyes on the room. And for the first few minutes, she reaches for the notes once, and then again, and then she does not reach for them again at all. She simply speaks. She knows what she built. She knows it the way Elira knows the things she builds, from the inside out, because she was there for every layer of it. When she finishes, Elder Kyrox is the first to nod. He nods the way he nods at things that are good, simply without theatre, with the sincere weight of someone who does not distribute approval as flattery. From across the room, Elira watches her and feels something that takes her a moment to name. It is not pride exactly, though it is close. It is recognition. The specific joy of watching someone become the thing they were always capable of being once they were given the room. Varric is seated 2 chairs away from her. At some point in the last several months, she cannot pinpoint when exactly, he stopped pretending that he is not fond of her. It happened the way real things happen, what without announcement. He started including her in conversations with his morning quarterstaff, then including her thoughts in his own reports, then one afternoon simply sat down beside her at the working table in the strategy room without explanation, as if he had always sat there, and it was only a technicality that he had not. He is watching Zanera's presentation with his arms folded, and his expression doing its most stoic work, which means he is trying not to show how impressed he is. He is failing, just barely, at the edges. Later, when the formal gathering breaks into the warm, informal evening of a pack that knows how to celebrate, Elira finds herself on the ridge. She did not plan to come here. She simply walked after dinner, the way she often does now, not because she needs to manage a thought or resolve a problem, but because walking in the cold air above the pack lights is a pleasure she has rediscovered. Walking for its own sake, existing in the world for its own sake, not because she is needed somewhere, but because she is glad to be where she is. The footsteps behind her are already familiar in the way that certain sounds become familiar, not noticed anymore as separate from the background of a life, because they have become part of it. Zerion stands beside her. He does not announce himself. He does not explain why he came up here instead of staying at the celebration. They both know why. This is the place where they come when the world has been full, and they want to exist for a moment without being anything except themselves. He reaches for her hand without looking at it, or he finds it in the dark the way he finds most things about her, not by searching, but by knowing where it is. They stand like that in the cold, looking down at the lights. Luna Elira Ravencrest. She turns the words over in her own mind, not for the first time, with an ease she did not have a year ago. Then she breathes out slowly, and the cold takes the breath and disperses it into the dark. She thinks about the girl who stood at the stone basin at 19 and felt the world stop making its usual noise and believed, completely, that love would be enough to hold something together. She doesn't regret that girl. She was not wrong to love as fully as she did. She was only wrong to believe that her love could substitute for someone else's choice to stay. She thinks about the woman who sat in the dark on the morning after the blood moon ceremony, watching Ravencrest's eastern window turn gold, and understood for the first time what it felt like to stop managing everything and simply breathe. The right life is not the one that fate assigns. It is the one you walk toward, the moment you understand you deserve it. She walked, head level, documents under her arm, dignity intact, one steady step at a time through the dark forest, and the cold and the unfamiliar, and the slow, warm building of a life that finally fit. She walked until she arrived somewhere that recognized her, somewhere that let her take up the space she had always occupied, somewhere that called her Luna and meant it. She was home. She had always carried the ability to get here. She had simply needed, finally, was at long last a direction worth walking toward. Zarian's hand tightens in hers, just slightly. She leans into his shoulder. Below them, the pack lights burn on. And if you are somewhere in the dark tonight, carrying something too heavy, holding yourself small for a life that has stopped asking you to expand, remember this. The door does not open until you stop leaning against it. She walked out of that hall with nothing except her documents and her dignity, and she built everything else herself. So can you.